Look at this Casanovian appeal. My hair is poofed up a little bit, and yes, it's been on the to-do list, but... as I've said a million times, this is just a place for me to goof off, do whatever I want, upload when I feel like uploading, things like that. It's never been anything important. I mean, I enjoy it. It's a place for me to be creative. But my last video had a record, and that's pretty cool, and I'd like to thank everybody for doing that, and the new subs. That's quite flattering, when someone just does something on their side. So, that's awesome. So maybe that'll motivate me. I don't know. I know it sounds silly for something that is, as you can tell with the production quality, things like that, it's not my forefront. But I'm just going to wrap that whole thing up. I'm just curious to see how it's going to affect me. As I said, honestly, I'm very flattered. Thank you guys for that. But let's not waste any more time on it and get to what we want to talk about. Okay, so this is a hot topic. I see it a lot talked about on the internet, coming from everybody in different political schools seems to have a different thought on this, but as well, I think a lot of people, regardless of where they sit, both economically and or politically, seem to have different viewpoints of it, which, I mean, that makes sense, but it seems to be a lot of people push for it, or think of a possibility. So what are we talking about? UBI, or Universal Basic Income, which is basically you get money for being alive. There's some places that are looking at trying it. There's some places that have thought about trying it. Some places that are in a process of implementing something like it. And what this would be aside everything else, basically you kind of just get a check for being you. Some people could argue what happens in Alaska as being a state resident, you get some sort of check. But that's more so tied into subsidies, oils, this, that, the other. So that's for anybody who's U.S.-based. Alaska does hook you up with a check. I think it's more of a refund. I don't know the exact legality of it, but Universal Basic Income is basically they hand you some money to be you. The school of thoughts about it, I don't really agree with. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I don't think it will ever happen for a lot of reasons. I don't think it's also something that we as economists, people interested in finance, business, this, that, the other, should even worry about or think about. Overall, I think the most important thing to think about, something like that, before we even get there, we need to be in a, what would be called a post-scarcity world. We're talking like a Star Trek situation, where something or materials themselves will be unlimited. Scarcity doesn't mean that there's not many, it's just the fact that there's only a certain amount, that if you're unaware of what scarcity means in an economic term. Now, as far as that goes, I would say if we wanted something like that, or if we don't want it, but if it was anything post-scarcity, I think power is going to be the start of a post-scarcity society. Energy, that's going to be the kickoff, and the dissemination from that is going to start to push towards that. And again, even if tomorrow I had a magical power device that did it, it would still take maybe hundreds of years to implement something like this, or the dissemination. I think that agriculture and food prices are going to skyrocket without some sort of benefit like that. And if we can get, theoretically, let's say we have this machine, this power machine, something like fusion power, but just way better. If we could harness the sun, whatever. You would still need to break everything down. For example, you would need to figure out what we're going to do with this excess power. Power's free. Okay, you don't have a power bill. That's great. But what do we do with power companies? How are we regulating it? Stuff like that. Then we're going to have to start worrying about other stuff. Like, what do we do with all this power? If you have unlimited power, what can we do with it? Okay, light bulbs are going to be really bright. That's great. Everybody can have a Tesla that goes 7,000 miles an hour. Wonderful. But like, what are the benefits? How do we build this, that, the other? There'd be a huge change in everybody's structure of thought and economics itself. I don't think too much would really change at front. I think the most important thing would be we would also have a near unlimited source of human growth, for the fact that things like starvation would just cease to exist. If you had unlimited power, you could desalinize all the water we really needed. And I can't say I know much about the ecology of what would happen if we started to pull a lot of water out of the ocean and, use it as fresh water. That could be bad. I'm sure somebody who knows this stuff would probably be able to expand on this or tell me that that's a terrible idea. It might not be, so I don't want to make any claims, because as I said, I haven't really researched it, but basically if we had unlimited power, unlimited water, the amount to grow food would only be set up by square mileage. And as we keep seeing, we keep cooking up newer, more efficient ways for crops. And, you know, the whole idea of greenhouses in the sky, things like that, could be a thing. I think that'd be kind of cool to eat a tomato grown in outer space. But so the whole idea, basically with the UBI, I think that we also run into, obviously, the very, very simple system of the fact the devaluation of currency is if you make $50,000 at your job and I give you $20,000 for existing, where the UBI would come from, the money, and then really are we going to reduce payments for careers? Obviously it's going to come from some form of taxation, be it an income tax, a flat tax, whatever. The money has to come from somewhere. But the whole idea, it just doesn't really click as something that we even need to start worrying about or thinking about. So I don't understand why so many people are pushing for it or talking about it. I mean, I'd also kind of like, you know, I think something like a Mars colony is going to be before UBI, to be honest. So if you want a futurist and everything, we can dream about giant robots. That's great. We should all think and plan for the future. But with how much stuff is going on right now, especially people who actually care or are knowledgeable of economics, we should probably be looking at today and tomorrow and focusing on what we have to deal with here, because obviously things aren't perfect, to put lightly. So, you know, obviously we should build maybe a 30-year plan, things like that, but starting from today, not starting from year 3000, and worrying about what problems we may or may not have in year 3000. So I just kind of think it's an overhyped thing. I think it's a lot of fun for people who are into that, but it kind of seems a little derailing for the community that so many people kind of care about something that I don't really see any feasibility in. And I've tried not to interject any of my own political thought or views into it. I just am speaking from a very kind of fact-based thing. You know, anytime that there's been a great change, that there's been a lot of strife through it, something like industrial evolution, let's be honest, not everybody bought a steam engine the first day they showed up. It took hundreds of years. And even though not everybody was sold on the idea when they first came out, and not everybody wanted to, and everybody who could want one or desired one couldn't afford them, they weren't, you know, so there's a lot of factors. But the whole UBI thing doesn't really jive to me as something that we should invest our time in about worrying about. So in case anybody was wondering or wants to know more, feel free to ask. But yeah, as far as my thoughts on UBI is, let's not sweat it. Have a good one.